Half a day, good afternoon. The Committee of the Whole is called back to order. My colleagues, we are now in the amendment portion and also comments. Earlier I asked the question, were there any comments? From the back, I received there was no comments, and then we moved to amendments.
No.
Let it be known, hold on, Speaker, I'm speaking. When I address you, when I need to address you. When we went to a recess, it was because I was waiting for amendments. And you heard me very clearly. I said we will recess to try to get the amendments to work it out and be amendable with everyone. It's quite evident that when we recessed, the amendments were not available. There was only 2 amendments on the website. And with that, I will move to Senator Torres, who will entertain your amendments.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
No, it's Senator Eitc here, Mr. Chair. I think we left off at Speaker Terlahi.
That's
correct. Where we left off, Mr. Chair.
I no doubt about that. I know who I left off with, Senator Eitc.
Why are we changing the rules of engagement
No,
then?
we're not changing the rules. The amendment was not available. If I had ruled out of order, then you would have to debate that, right? So I'm going to move to where the amendment was already placed. Senator Torres has an amendment.
Mr. Chair.
If you want to challenge my rule,
I'll challenge you then, Mr.
Okay,
Chair,
then
because this is very unfair,
Just
Mr.
a point
Chair.
of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Madam Speaker, please state your point of order.
Yes, I believe I was recognized. We were on the 3rd round. I was on my 3rd round, so I have an option to make comments or amendments on my 3rd round, and you had recognized me. So I asked that I be allowed to do that.
And your amendment at the time
My
was
comments,
not available.
you asked everybody for comments or amendments, and I even, on the record, asked you to clarify, is this for comments only or for comments and amendments? And you said, for comments and amendments, and so I would like to have my opportunity.
To make comments.
To make comments or amendments, just like everyone else.
Madam Speaker, your amendment wasn't available on the website. That's what I was asking, that you ladies could coordinate and fix it.
Mr. Chair, my amendment's been available for 2 hours. We recessed
Can
for
we have a
an
point of
hour
inquiry,
prior and
Mr.
3 hours
Okay,
now.
okay.
It's been
Mr. Chair,
available on the floor with copies to every senator.
With all due respect, Madam Speaker, Mr. Chair, can I just have a point of inquiry?
Yes, please.
Maybe to ease the, let's see whose amendment was up first, and let's see so we can get
The
going,
rule-
please.
That
The
was not the
amendment that
rule.
was up first, Madam Vice.
That
and
was
to my
not the
colleagues,
rule,
stand
Mr.
by.
Chair. Please don't change the rules in the middle of
Speaker,
our last
Mr. Chair, you
vote.
have
Madam
the
Speaker, por favor,
Oh, my
let's
God.
not use the gavel. Okay? Stand by. Hold on, Madam Speaker. The question was asked. I'm going to answer the question. No, it's not going to work. The question was asked. I'm going to give the answer. Number 1, the first amendment that was placed on the website, which I asked everybody to place, was Senator Torres' 2 amendments. Okay? And if you want, you can look it up yourself and you can see that they're the first 2.
Mr. Chair, there are
And
questions
then,
and
Mr.
comments.
Chair, point of order. Point of order.
Point of order. Go ahead.
The question's irrelevant because you went around the room, regardless of the order of introduction of amendments, and you asked everyone around this room
Right.
if they had comments or amendments on the bill. And then you came to me, Mr. Chair, and that's
Madam-
where we left off at the recess.
Madam Speaker, let me just, if you want, you can rewind it. Number 1, I asked, are there any comments? And I advised my colleagues, and you weren't in sight. Okay, let's start with that. I asked, and I advised everybody if there's any comments, and there's only 2 amendments. I was very clear of that. There was only 2 amendments that was in the system. 2 amendments. And it was introduced or authored by Senator Torres. Then we moved on. Nobody had any comments. Nobody else had an amendment.
I did
Then-
have comments, Mr. Chair, and amendments, and that's where we
Can
left
you
off.
just finish answering the question, please,
You
and
know,
then we'll...
Speaker,
At least allow her the comments, Mr. Chair.
stand by. I have no problem with that one.
No, we all know what this is all about. It's about an amendment. You want somebody else to proffer. So let's make it straight so
Oh
the
my
public
God, what
knows
are you
why you're
talking
doing
about?
this.
Senator Eitc, if you want to challenge the order, what I
What's
choose, then
going on
challenge it.
here? I don't know.
You know what I'm doing?
I'm
Good.
not saying anything, I'm just asking.
All right? Your mic's on.
Mr. Chair, you are you are the chair, please. You
I
can
made-
call it.
I made it very clear. I will proceed now to Senator Torres to introduce her amendments, and we'll move from there. And then we'll go to the next amendment that's offered.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. You recognized me before the recess. It was my turn to make comments or amendments on the bill. This is the third round, and you said that the sponsor would be the last person in the third round.
Madam Speaker, I asked you very specifically, are you ready to make comments or amendments? You
And-
said, no, you're not ready for amendments, but if you want to make comments, I will accept that, but amendments will start with Senator Torres. So you can decide. You can make your comments. I have no problem with comments, but the amendments will start with Senator Torres. Do you have a problem with that? And if you want to rule against me, then offer the rule. I mean, the
No,
challenge.
you're the one altering the rules, Mr. Chair, but
Senator,
I will
Madam Speaker,
proceed with my
follow.
comments if you will allow me.
I'll
I
give you-
believe that's where we left off. I asked the clerk, after you recessed us for 2 hours, whether my amendments were passed out. They were. I asked her if we had left off with me, and she said we had. And that I should have the floor when we come back. That's where we are, Mr. Chair. Unless you want to alter the rules,
No, I'm not altering the rules. I'm sticking with what the rules are. Now, you want to make comments, you can make comments. If you want to make an amendment, Senator Torres will be first to make the amendments before you.
so do you want me to close on the bill after her? I will do that.
You can do that. What did you say again? Repeat that.
I don't know. You want her to make her amendments, the 2 that she's uploaded, and then I'll close on the bill instead? I can do that.
No, you can make an amendment to the amendment if you want, or any amendments. I'm asking you, Senator.
What's the
Madam
difference?
Speaker. Madam Speaker, do you want to make any comments to the bill? Yes or no?
Yes.
Because the amendments will
I
start
would-
with Senator Torres.
You've already recognized me to make comments, so I'm only
Comments
asking
only.
you
Please
to
continue
honor.
with your comments, and amendments will start with Senator Torres after your comments. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the third round of our discussion on this bill in the Committee of the Whole.
It's not a,
Pardon?
no.
Can you please stop the time? What?
Madam Vice, do you have a
I have a point
or
of inquiry. Just to make sure. Are we in the third round now?
We are on
And
the
then-
third round for comments. I asked that earlier, okay? We got down to Senator Torres. Pause, Speaker. We had came down to Senator Torres. You came walking in. I said,
'Cause
do you have any
I-
comments to make? And you said you have an amendment that is going through the system. She already had an amendment in place. And I said, I'm going to leave her to last because I wanted her to close on her bill also.
Yeah. The only reason why I'm asking Mr. Chair is because when I was standing up before the lunch break and before I sat down, you said that you had already gone, and I said, well, I had a statement in support of, and then you said Estemanadzan. So I sat patiently, and then we said they're taking a recess, and I'm just, so yes, I had a statement to say, but they said I lost my turn, so I'm just wondering, contrary to what anybody else might think in here, I had a statement of support for this bill, but I was told that they went around the room and that I couldn't do it anymore. So I said, okay, I respect the process, and I sat down. So I'm just, I'm just asking, if you're going to open this to making comments on the bill, to support or not support, I'm willing to work that. But just let me know, because I am the co-author of this bill, and I wanted to support the measure.
Yes,
Let's
Madam
replay
Vice.
the tape, Mr. Chair, where the Vice Speaker can see that you asked her specifically for comment and she declined, and you asked me for comment and then you recessed.
I did not decline.
Stand by. We're
Hold
going to
on, you can-
recess
you
and
can
we're going
share
to
it.
pull up the system and see what was stated. My understanding is that we went through and we found there was only 2 left. We recess at this point. My colleagues, I proceeded to the audiovisual room and reviewed the recordings. And I will read. Please understand that if you watch the recording, you'll see that I'm consistent. And if you want to challenge my ruling, then you state the challenge and then we go to the vote. Number one, it starts out with, as we went around the room for comments, because there was only 2 amendments on the system. I stated, and it's on the record, I will proceed to Speaker before I get to Senator Torres. We'll make our amendments. She has 2 amendments, and that's the only thing we have on the drive. From the Speaker. This is from the recording. I also am working on amendment, but not yet uploaded. Can you come back to me? Okay, but we'll go ahead and entertain her amendment, which is Senator Torres. When you're asking for comment, you're asking for comments or amendments at this time. Comments at this point. Then we'll go to the amendments. Your response, Madam Speaker, is okay, which there's only 2 that Senator Torres has introduced. If anybody wants to challenge my ruling that we're going to, I'll allow Speaker to give her comments. I'm not questioning that. But on amendments, we will go starting with Senator Torres. That was stated before we recessed. Now, if you want to challenge the ruling, then state it so we can get the vote if I'm going to be overruled. And for you, Madam Vice, it's on the recording. You waive no comments. So we will move from there, okay? I apologize, but it's on the recording. And we'll leave that alone. Is there any challenge to my ruling on where we're going to go? We're going to call comments with the Speaker, and then the amendments will start with Senator Torres. Do we have any?
And what about the rules of engagement for the Committee of the Whole for the 3 rounds?
Madam Speaker, which one now are we going to work on that you wanted?
No, I'm just saying
we
the rule
did
was...
2 rounds, and the last one is comments and amendments.
Right.
After we went through all the comments, there was only 2 amendments. Do you want me to reread what I just typed what was said on the system?
No,
it's
Mr.
not me.
Chair.
I didn't create this on my own.
I confirm everything you've said there. That's correct. That's exactly where we left off, where it was my turn to either give comments or amendments, and I said I had both. Yeah, I had amendments too.
And I also
And I'm willing to give my comments.
Okay,
I'll
give your
proceed,
comments,
and we'll
and then
see
we'll
what
proceed
happens.
to the amendments.
Yes.
Okay, please. Thank you.
All right, so we're talking, Bill 202, recognizes a great need in our community that are being suffered by small businesses, in large part due to the pandemic, inflation, and many of the factors that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Through federal small business programs, Guam's businesses have received about $378 million since the start of the pandemic through CARES Act and ARP funds. And through local government initiatives, businesses have received about $40 million in CARES and ARP funds and an additional $50 million for LEAP program. The legislature has also passed 2 laws over the last 18 months that exempt certain small businesses from paying the full business privilege tax. Public Law 3590 was signed into law on June 26, 2020, allowed businesses with gross annual incomes between $50,000 and $500,000 to pay GRT at 3% for the first $250,000 revenue. Public Law 3627 made that tax exemption permanent for small businesses and made it retroactive starting January 1, 2020. This exemption can be utilized by approximately 90% of businesses on Guam. So this bill would extend the exemption of GRT at 3% to the first $500,000 in revenue for businesses making less than $500,000 or $500,000 or less. So I wanted to amend the bill and my amendment had been passed out prior to our recess. It'd been up since 11:15 or something, passed out to all senators, and it was to hopefully make the transition easier for the Department of Revenue and Taxation. First of all, it applies this bill retroactively to January 1, 2022, because she had said it should be applied to a calendar year. That's how they calculate their taxes and whether they fit into the exemption. So it would have applied it to retroactively to January 1st, 2022. I believe that that amendment is critical. It is what we had to come back and do for one of our previous bills, is to make that amendment and make it retroactive back to January 1st of that year. And so I believe as well that this would give the relief to the small businesses as we intend, which is immediately if possible. The other part of the amendment was to make the act effective 90 days, which would give the Department of Revenue and Taxation 90 days to do the new forms, make everybody aware of the new filing requirements. And so the overall amendment would have been that the act shall be effective 90 days from enactment and apply retroactively to January 1, 2022. I would make that motion right now, Mr. Chair.
Are you done with your comments?
No.
Finish your comments, please. Clock is ticking, it's 1:36. You got so much for comments. Then, like I mentioned, we are going to go to amendments of Senator Torres.
My amendment's been passed out, Mr. Chair, but I want to reiterate that the legislature has pushed for small businesses to receive assistance through tax exemptions. And while I did not support the business privilege tax increase from 4% to 5%, and I have supported every effort to reduce that from 5% to 4% prior to the pandemic, what the legislature has done by targeting these small businesses making less than $500,000, and with this bill, will allow them to avail of a 3% GRT rate, which is more advantageous than the rollback to 4% that has been discussed. And then again, this is for 90% of Guam's businesses. So I stand in support of this bill. And again, I ask you to allow me to make my amendments, as everyone else in here has been offered that opportunity, Mr. Chair. And that is the rules of engagement for Committee of the Whole on the third round. We are allowed comments and amendments. And my amendment was passed out, and it's on everybody's desk since 11:15 this morning.
Are you done with your comments, Madam Speaker? You're done? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes, but I made a motion, Mr. Chair.
Made a motion, I made a ruling already.
I made a motion, Mr. Chair.
Motion to do what? To hear your amendment?
Motion to amend.
Motion to amend, when I already made a ruling that we're going to proceed to amendment to Senator Torres. Are you challenging my rule?
No, I'm making a motion. After your ruling, I'm making a motion.
Okay, Madam Speaker, I'm going to go rule you out of order. I made that ruling that we're going to go to Senator Torres. You wish to challenge that rule? That call?
Ruled me out of order from my motion. Yes, I'd like to challenge that ruling of the presiding officer.
Okay, all in favor of ruling, all in favor in ruling over my decision to proceed to Senator Torres for her amendments first, please raise your hand. There's only
Does your ruling allow to come back to me with my amendments then?
After her amendments, I'm going to come back to you, Speaker.
All right, then I
made
withdraw.
that clear.
Fine.
I said that on the tape, and I will say it again. So are we going to go with what I rule? I'm going to come back to you, Speaker. All I need is an amendment from Senators. That being said, are you withdrawing your challenge, or you want me to go with the amendments, or what? Your amendment's going to work.
I'm going to challenge the speaker or the chairman. I'll challenge it.
All in favor of challenging the ruling that we're going to move to the amendments of Senator Torres that was introduced first, please raise your hand. Huh? Okay, you want me to speak louder? Your challenge is that all in favor of the ruling of the chair? No? Of overruling the chair. Okay, please raise your hand. 1, 2. Now we will proceed to Senator Torres. Senator Torres, you have 2 amendments, and you're followed with 2 amendments that was introduced by Madam Speaker, and we also have an amendment that we'll see if it'll be even appropriate from the Vice Speaker. And then we'll end it there, and then Senator Torres will close. Thank you. Senator Torres, please.
Jesus Maasi, my first amendment is to page 1, and my amendment is to add in place as co-sponsor of the bill the name James C. Moylan, and to place Senator Moylan's name after my name as the list of co-sponsors of Bill 202. So that is my first amendment.
Any comments? Does anybody want to speak to the amendment? There being none, are there any objection to the amendment? Or do you need to close, Senator Torres, on that? Not needed?
Yes, I just want
Okay,
to.
please.
I just want to graciously acknowledge the partnership and collaboration that Senator Moylan lent me in moving this Measure 202 forward. And so, with that recognition, I wanted to add him as is deserved as second to me as co-sponsor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any objection to this amendment proffered by Senator Torres to add Senator Moylan after her name? There being none, amendment passes. Your next amendment, please.
Thank you. My second amendment is to line 17 of page 2 of the bill to amend the bill to read Section 3, effective date. This act shall be effective on July 1, 2022. And I want to acknowledge and also add to that Frank Blas Jr. as a co-sponsor to this amendment. It was the discussion by Senator Blas that prompted us to rethink the date and to move it forward to July 1, which Ms. Shimizu concurred was more than sufficient time for her to effect this should this bill become law, to make it effective. And also it coincides with the clean break in the quarters for the filing of business privilege tax. So my amendment is to move it up. The impact we know is only $1 million, and the time allotted to give them to effect it will make it possible for them to go forward and see this adjustment to this additional adjustment to those that class of ratepayers.
All right, thank you. Does anyone like to comment? I'm looking around, going around, my Vice Speaker, and then followed by the Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Chair,
And based on this, and based on looking at the amendments online, I will support this amendment, but also support what the intent was for both me and the Speaker before the author of the bill talked about making it retroactive to January 1st. So I don't care who gets the credit, but I had that amendment too, and I did have a statement earlier. So I support the efforts and ask you, Mr. Chair, if you're accepting the motion, if you want to make it a TMB, TT, I don't care. Just know that I think it's important that we at least look at the measures, listen to what was said earlier, and make it retroactively to January 22nd. And if she wants to get credit, fine. But that's what I had also.
Madam Vice, I just want to make it very clear that you understand the
Point of
effect-
personal privilege,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I was going to get to you next. Yes, Madam Speaker, go ahead.
Point of personal privilege. Someone's referencing me in this body and some kind of motive about wanting credit for an amendment. No, That's not what I want. I want the rules to be followed fairly for every single one of us, not to be applied differently when it comes to me for some other political reason, and I don't know what those reasons are. So
Mr.
I
Chair,
rise a
if I
point
may,
of personal
All
privilege.
right, thank you, Madam
elaborate.
Speaker.
This was a statement that was said by Senator Frank Blas.
Okay,
And
but,
based on the discussions from the retiring speaker, and that there are two amendments on the floor referencing the same thing. So all I'm saying that is I support the efforts of this amendment, wanting an amendment to the amendment, but if there's two amendments on the floor resulting in the same result, then I support it.
okay.
But I do have an amendment, and
Okay.
you recognize
Do-
me.
Are you gonna?
And she has a separate amendment,
No.
but I'm talking about Senator Frank Blas.
Madam Vice, your chance to speak. Do you have an amendment to this amendment? No, is your amendment to this amendment? Yes. Okay, you have an amendment to this amendment? Madam Vice and my colleagues, just remind us just a little bit so that we try to remember exactly what was said by Revenue and Tax. They asked for some leeway, at least 90 days, to be able to implement the program. And they had no objection to if we wanted to bring it back to January 22, the act, but the implementation would stay the same 90 days out, okay? Let's follow that. The introduction of this amendment was to start the date of July when they implement, and it gives them room to prepare for going backwards to January 22, which is exactly what most of us really wanted. So, your amendment is to change the July to January, correct?
Yes, sir?
Okay. That doesn't leave any room for Revenue and Tax to do anything. I just want to make sure we understand that. They wanted
just-
90 days out. Now
No.
the act itself would be. That's why I asked you, Madam Vice, if you can please make it very clearly, your amendment is the effective date shall apply to January instead of
Right.
July, and shall apply to oh, okay. That's why I
Yes.
wanted you to read it, okay?
Yeah, this act shall be effective. Instead of October 1st, it was changed to July 1st by the author of the amendment.
Got it?
And I ask that it shall apply retroactively to January 1st.
Okay, does
And-
anyone
and
have
these
any
methods
comments
have
they
been
want to
done
make
before.
to that amendment that was introduced? Madam Speaker, do you want to make a comment to this? Is she making an amendment to Senator Torres' amendment?
Yeah, I raise a point of order. I think that should be a
Yes.
separate amendment. It doesn't affect her date of July 1, 2022. It adds on another clause that can be made by separate amendment.
Right.
Colleagues, let me take a quick recess. Let me get with legal. I want to make sure everything is right. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. My colleagues, I spoke with legal, and the amendment to the amendment is allowable. Even though I understand where my colleague has said it should have been introduced separately, but through legal's advice, it's allowable to add, because she didn't change, she just added a continuation of the same, of an amendment. All right? Does anybody want to comment to that amendment to the amendment?
Point of order.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, according to your ruling, all amendments are going to be done in order. So this amendment should be done in the order that it was received, which was after mine, Mr.
Point of
Chair. So we
personal
can come
privilege,
back to
Mr.
this.
Chair. Point of personal privilege,
Stand by.
Mr. Chair, can I please note?
What's your point of
You got a
personal privilege?
ruling, Mr. Chair, that says an amendment to an amendment is allowable with a present amendment on the floor right now, a motion.
That's correct.
And that ruling is already done.
It's
You're
applying.
going to have to ask for the vote if they're going to challenge you on that.
That is not a
as
point of personal,
order.
point of order, Mr. Chair. That's not even a point of personal privilege.
Right.
My colleagues,
It's because it's me.
por favor, listen, please, people listen to yourself. Number one, there's an amendment by Senator Torres. There was comments offered by Senator, the Vice Speaker, and she proffered an amendment to the amendment. I asked that I recess to speak with legal. It's an allowable. Does anybody want to question the allowable of the amendment to the amendment? Yes or no? If you want, raise your hand. If not, and I understand where the speakers come from, get in the order. The order is we're still working on the amendment of Senator Torres. We're still in order, and it's an amendment to the amendment. I don't see what out of order we're in, other than, I'm just going to leave my comments for something else. Yes, Senator Eitc, do you have any? Nothing? Okay. So now, does anybody have any comments to the amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
Proffered by Senator Vice Speaker. Yes. Senator Eitc, you wanted to speak? I'll let you speak first.
Yes, I
Yes,
have
please.
raised up my hand to talk about the amendment, Mr. Chair.
The amendment
To the
of the
amendment.
amendment.
Yes.
Okay,
the
go
amendment
please.
to the amendment.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think the reason why we're having so much difficulty here and the public is watching this circus going on right now is because of the intent of what Speaker Chalahi has made earlier before we took a break. And that was the conversation you yourself, Mr. Chair, as well as the Speaker, as well as the author of the original amendment, had with Department of Revenue and Taxation. And we watched some of his colleagues watched and listened to some of the conversation that was made. And it was agreed upon earlier, while some of the other colleagues were not in the session hall at the time, when this conversation was going on between the Department of Revenue and Taxation and the three individuals, was not here to hear that there was going to be an amendment to make this retroactive. There was going to be an amendment to change the date of the effective date. So we had two individuals, one to change the effective date, and then we had Speaker's amendment that was going to make this retroactive in January of 2022, which I stand full support of. But we're here now going back and forth because somebody wants to come in and make an amendment to an amendment that's already been established. It was already established, it's already on the books. And Mr. Chair, at 11:25, that amendment was already on our desks from Speaker Chalahi that will make this retroactive at 11:25. At least this body can have the decency to allow that amendment to go through all the work that's been done instead of taking it and stealing it and putting it on an amendment to an amendment.
Please be careful.
Let's have some fairness in here.
Be careful of claiming anybody's stealing, okay?
Let's have
We
some
got
fairness.
certain
Well,
arms here.
Mr. Chair, let me see if I can find another word for taking someone else's amendment. I can't think of one other than that. But Mr. Chair, I stand in objection to this amendment to the amendment because there is that same amendment standalone by itself ready to go. So let's allow those individuals who have taken the time to talk to revenue and taxation, has taken the time to talk to you as the committee chair on the intent, what the intent was. That's why this arguing and bickering back and forth is happening. So let's do that. Do it the right way. My goodness, people worked hard on this. Allow them their hard work to pay off.
Thank you, Senator Eitc. Senator Torres, you wanted to make comments, because there's an objection to the amendment, but you wanted to make comments, please? Feel free, and then we're going to go to the vote, or unless Madam Speaker would like to speak on the amendment. Yes, before we go to...
Okay, so it's my turn.
It's your
Okay,
turn.
Thank you.
Yours alone.
It's nice to know that it's my turn. Mr. Chair, I am in support of this amendment, and I want to just back up a little bit and kind of tame the waters a little bit, because I think that the discussion has gotten a little confusing. When this bill was being discussed, and I mentioned Senator Blas, he had raised the issue of the timeliness, whether we can move the effective date from when it was originally proposed in the bill in October to an earlier time, because his rationale was, should it be, why not make it sooner if we can make it sooner? And then the discussion morphed into whether, how soon was too soon? Do we need to give Rev and Tax some time to implement it? And so it was agreed that, around June 1 or July 1 would be a good date. July 1 was the date that I personally was discussing with the director, and that was an agreed upon time because, as I mentioned before, it coincides with the quarters. And July 1 starts a new quarter in the tax filing. Remittance. Now, this whole idea about retroactivity, when you look at the bill itself in that section, this exemption is an exemption for business privilege tax that applies annually. And the way that it's stated is it commences on the first day of the month of the new tax year. So Senator Blas was concerned, and he also discussed with me in the process of when does this actually come into effect? Does it come into effect mid-year, or does it come into effect at the beginning of the calendar year? Per law, it's the beginning of the calendar year. So the discussion then morphed into, if this is a calendar year tax, not a fiscal year which begins in October, but a calendar year tax, there are two options. We either make it effective January 2023, so it coincides with the new calendar year, or we apply it to the existing 2022. And the discussion that was had, as being one of the persons, and I'm speaking first person because I think there's credibility to first person accounting for what was said. So what was said was the need to clarify that if in fact the intention was for it to be applicable to calendar year 2022, it would be more advantageous and clear-cut to indicate the retroactivity nature of this, as was done when the bill was proffered before under you, good chairman. So that is the clarity in the civil and rational discussion about how to make sure that this bill is clear, and whatever amendments and changes we make to the law are clear enough for Rev and Tax to effectively and correctly abide by the intentions of the legislature, because it always goes back to what was the legislature's intent when they passed a measure, when things are ambiguous. So to avoid the ambiguity, which our good speaker also spoke to, and I believe was one of the three people in the conversation, but I'll let her speak for herself, it was important to clear up that ambiguity if in fact it existed. And so that was why the discussion was whether to insert that to make it absolutely clear that we are not looking at applying this prospectively to 2023, but in fact, we intend as a legislature to apply it to the present calendar year. As we know, a calendar year begins in January. So with that, I appreciate the discussion that has happened with several colleagues in the room, whether online, that's recordable, or in colleague discussions, which is a normal process here when we think things through and we ask each other questions. The amendment to the amendment is that shoot off of that logical thought that everyone had about how this is really going to accomplish what we intend. So the amendment now accomplishes the intent of making sure that revenue tax gets all the forms, all the information, all their, whatever they need to reprogram in their computer systems done in time, enough time to get people to understand what's going on and make everyone understand it's for this calendar year, 2022. So I support this amendment and I thank my colleagues for being active.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, you wanted to comment on this amendment or no?
On the amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, I love the amendment to the amendment. It's a great amendment to this amendment. It's actually one of the best amendments proffered today. Unfortunately, yeah, it was put on the table since 11:15, and so I'm glad it's finally making it into this bill, Mr. Chair. The point of this amendment is to do, and that's why it took us time to write it, but we did put it on the table before 11:15, to do exactly what Revenue and Tax said we must do, and that is make it comply with a calendar year. We actually had to come back in a previous bill and make a prior bill retroactive. So we learned our lesson. We should have learned our lesson. So it's very clear that this type of an amendment is needed, and it's either, as the previous speaker said, 2022 or 2023. I'm very glad that the author now likes this amendment because there was prior objection to making this amendment. But I'm glad whichever way it's going to get into this bill, that this amendment's going to get in. It's very ironic, I find it, Mr. Chair, that the rules get so convoluted and that someone has the nerve to mention the word credit. So as to the amendment, that it shall apply retroactively to January 1st, 2022, of course, I support that amendment. The bill should read that. I do not support this whole convolution of rules, though, Mr. Chair. I don't support, that when we go into third round, you get a choice, or you can do comments or amendments, and then we change the rules after that. It's just not fair. And I just think we should try better to abide by our own rules and be as fair as possible across the board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Point of
There is an
inquiry,
point
Mr. Chair?
Point of inquiry?
Yes.
Okay, let's try it.
If we can find out through legal that in the event this amendment fails, the amendment to the amendment fails, and because it's similar, it's the same amendment that has been proffered in another amendment that was intended to go on the floor, is it still, are we still able to incorporate that? Because sometimes if an amendment is exactly the same, it can't be heard again. Can we find that out first, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we'll take a quick recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Senator Eitc, legal said that it's allowable, it's binding. It's allowable, it's acceptable, it'll bind, it'll work.
It'll work, meaning, Mr. Chair, if this were to fail, right?
If this were to fail, then
Then-
we go to the next amendment and we move on. This
Which-
is amendment to the amendment.
Right, which is exactly the same as this amendment that was proffered, right? So-
No, Senator Eitc, let's focus. If this amendment fails,
The amendment
move
to the
on.
amendment,
no,
sir.
the amendment to the amendment, that's correct.
Right.
Then we go and we finish off with the amendment, and then whatever amendment is next, we'll go on with that one, and we move on.
Even though it's exactly the same. Okay, I'm yeah.
Well, stand by, Madam Vice. Please, my colleagues, look at the amendments. Not one of them, they may be worded identical, but they're not the same because the way they're offered. Please just look at it. And if you ever want to debate about any ruling I make, go to the YouTube and listen to it again, and I'll help you even if you need. But moving along, do you still maintain your objection so we can move to vote?
Mr. Chair, according to legal, as I asked that question, they were nodding their head yes, that another amendment can come. Now, Mr. Chair, the MCT amendment, right, that is being amended, okay, the MCT, okay,
The MCT that's being offered,
and shall be, okay. So, yes, Mr. Chair, I still
you still object?
because I think it's just not, I said my piece earlier,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, so.
thank you.
I do object.
Well, legal says that it's allowable. All we have to do is pass it.
Or object to it, or, vote on it, because
We
I
vote
am
on it.
objecting.
All we have to do
yeah.
is vote, and you object
Right.
to it. So there being an,
Yeah, we just want to make sure, Mr. Chair.
understood. I asked them that question exactly. I asked it in the beginning when the bill amendment was first introduced. To want to make sure it was okay. Ask the vice. We'll take a short recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. My colleagues, there is an objection to the amendment All in favor of, no. Objection to the amendment or amendment? All in favor of the amendment to the amendment? I beg your pardon? So you want to reset for a couple minutes and bring him back in? Okay, please check on him, please. Thank you. We'll recess for a couple minutes. Committee of the whole is called back to order. We will now proceed. Do you need to close on your amendment? If not, okay, we're going to move. There's an objection. So all in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, motion fails. We will now proceed back to the amendment. We're back to the amendment of Senator Torres. Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, we're not on the amendment no more. It's only on the basic amendment. Do you have any comments you want to make to that amendment, please? Thank you.
Yes. So the amendment is proffered by the sponsor of the bill is to change the effective date from October 1st to July 1st, which would make it effective sooner. And I have no objection to making it sooner. I actually prefer that it be sooner than that because the Department of Revenue and Taxation told us they really only need 90 days to put up new forms and to inform BPT filers of the new forms and the new exemption. And so I don't object to moving it up. I just prefer that we moved it up sooner. I would suggest. But I'm not going to object to this amendment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments to the basic amendment proffered by Senator Torres? No comments? Do you want to close on it? You're only at your amendment. Nobody's object. Oh, there's no amendment to it. Do you want to close on it, or we're going? I mean, I think you spoke on it already. But if you want, please.
Yes, I just want to ask for my colleagues' support of this. July 1, 2022 was the preferred date that Rev and Tax indicated to me, and that was why I put it at July 1 specifically. And also, regardless of when if this bill should pass, when it gets signed into law, we know that it's not a floating date. It's a set date at July 1, 2022, and I think that that's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Are there any objection to the amendment to Bill 202 proffered by Senator Torres? There being none, no objection, amendment passes. We will now proceed to the amendments that was proffered by Madam Speaker. We have 2 amendments proffered by Madam Speaker. Okay, we're going to go through Speaker's amendments. Okay, folks? No comments. Amendments only. Madam Speaker, you have 2 amendments. Which one would you like to entertain first? Your call.
I'll proffer the one on line 18, page 2.
Madam Speaker, please.
Oh, sorry. This is an amendment to add the words, "This act shall apply retroactive to January 1st, 2022 to Section 3 of the bill."
Thank you. Does anyone like to comment to that amendment proffered by the Speaker? I see not. Senator Tidegui, and then followed by Senator Blas.
Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Speaker for this amendment. I think we all realize that, the business community on Guam has been having it very difficult, not just in this year, which we're giving them the break, retroactive until January 1st. I wish we can take this back to a whole year from now. I mean, think about it. We went into lockdown. All businesses were shut down in March of 2020. 2 years. I mean, if I had my choice, I'd like to put this to January 1st, 2021, but it becomes very difficult to do that, to go retroactive and that far back and when taxes have already been paid. I'd like to think that they would get credit for it, at least, moving forward. I mean, this is the same scenario I did, Mr. Chair, with a bill that you proffered for the 250. It was the same exact amendment that was made, where not only did I include a particular type of company that dealt with rentals to be included into that, but also had it retroactive January 1st, 2020. In fact, It's consistent to what we've done, this body has done, where we have taken a date to begin retroactively. This is a time when business is really needed. So I greatly appreciate this amendment that was being proffered by the Speaker and her due diligence to ensure that it can be done, because the conversation between Rev and Tax and yourself, Mr. Chair, as well as the Speaker, if they can do something like this, and it was said that they can. It's going to take them a while, but they would be able to do it. This is what we need to do, be consistent, just like the bill before this that allowed this exemption. Now we're just increasing it a little more. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tyree. Senator Blas, you have comments you'd like to make on? No, you waive on that one. Anybody else would like to comment? If not, Madam Speaker, do you need to close on this amendment?
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay.
Just because it's my last opportunity on the bill, perhaps. And yes, I would like to say that I hope my colleagues will support this amendment. It will bring some relief to businesses in this tax year, the current tax year that we are in. It will signal to them right away that, that burden of paying these BPTs on a monthly basis may be alleviated almost immediately. We may have to wait now till July, but hopefully Rev and Tax will have everything ready and be able to process, going back now. I was hoping, this would be effective sooner because it's only February now. So to go back to January is not a big problem. But Revenue and Taxation has given us the confidence that they can do this regardless of the effective date. They will do it. They will make it retroactive. They can make it retroactive to January 1st if this amendment applies. I just want to state again that I completely support the intent of this bill. I don't want that to get lost in all of what's happened here today, our disagreements. However, I support this bill. This bill furthers the legislature's relief to businesses during this pandemic and their relief to businesses in general, because this is a permanent Dave Santos exemption. It's permanent. And so this relief from 5% BPT, GRT to 3% is huge. And for these businesses, much better than a repeal of BPT from 5 to 4%. So I'm very glad that we are able to do this. And over the past couple of years, we've, expanded it, and it's solid. And I'm hoping that, again, the businesses in turn, treat their employees well, keep those on that, they might not have without these types of exemptions, they continue to apply for the other relief that is available through GITA and through direct federal funds, and that we as a government are going to continue to put all our efforts towards assisting not only businesses, but also the individuals. Because we know, Mr. Chair, from the last point in time count, that there are so many people on Guam still suffering homelessness, still suffering poverty, still suffering, and that has all been exacerbated by the pandemic. Those people might not see relief from this bill as much as we hoped. We hoped businesses would lower their prices, right, to reflect the lowering of GRTs. We haven't necessarily seen that lowering of prices as a result of our laws that reduce BPT. So I hope that we will continue all of our efforts to assist businesses, to assist individuals who continue to suffer on Guam, especially due to the pandemic, but of course due to other factors of living on Guam that we must overcome, including years and years of sometimes just not the right priorities. So I agree with this, Mr. Chair, and I agree with this rollback of BPTs. I agree with it on a permanent basis, and I agree with it for 90% of Guam's business privilege tax filers. Sizus Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Are there any objections to this amendment? There being none, motion passes. You have one more amendment, Madam Speaker?
Yeah, I'll withdraw that. I'm not going to proffer
You're
it.
not going to proffer it. My colleagues, we have no more amendments. We're now down to Senator Torres. On your bill, please, if you can proceed to make your comments and close the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to take this opportunity again to thank my co-sponsors for coming on board with me. Senator Barnes, Senator Pito Terlahi, Senator Joseph Augustine, Senator Duenas, Senator Adder, Senator Blas, and Senator Moylan for working very hard on reaching a good approach forward with Bill 202. And with that, I just ask for my colleagues' continued support for the passage of this bill. Sizus Maasi.
Senator Torres, do you have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that Bill number 202-36 COR, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations and Housing, and further amended in the Committee of the Whole, with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, be placed on the third reading file.
On the motion that it be placed on the third reading file with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, are there any objection? Being that there's no objection, motion carries. My colleagues, we will recess for a few minutes and then we'll get ready to start with the next bill, which is Bill 170-36, and we'll ask the panel to please come in. So let's take a quick recess.
The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are now on Bill number 170-36LS, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, introduced by Frank Blage Jr., Joe S. St. Augustine, and V. Anthony Atta. An act to appropriate the sum of $250,000 from the 2021 Earned Income Tax Credit Reimbursement and/or the 2021 General Fund unappropriated revenues to the Guam Unique Merchandise and Art, GUMA, for the purpose of providing financial assistance to the incubated business graduates of the GUMA program. Materials for the Committee of the Whole are in the shared session Google Drive folder labeled 22222 Committee of the Whole. Our rules of engagement. There will be 3 rounds for discussion. We will have 2 rounds of questions for the panel, with each senator allotted 5 minutes for questions, not including responses from the panel. Time to speak may not be yielded from more than one member to another. A member who yields that member's time on a question yields all the members' time on that question and may not later speak, even if all the time yielded was not used. After the completion of the second round of questions, panelists will be excused. The third round is for amendments or comments to speak on the bill. Proposed amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email at 36glsession@gmail.com. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. We will now begin on the bill. Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Does this count towards my first round one, or is this my introduction to the bill?
This is your opening, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues. And I also want to thank in advance the members of the committee of the whole, or the panel that's here for this bill today. Bill 170-36LS, like you said, Madam Speaker, in a nutshell, is an act to basically appropriate the sum of $250,000 to the Guam Unique Merchandise Arts Program. This program, Madam Chair, it has been a very successful program in helping businesses, helping individuals who want to get into business, want to start up a business, want to learn and do it the right way. What this program has provided over the last few years is individuals the opportunity to take their passion, to take what they feel they can be successful in business, and guide them and help them towards that success. What this funding will be able to provide is a continued effort by GUMA for aspiring and upcoming entrepreneurs. You know, right now in this climate that we're in, and as far as the pandemic, this is one of those bills where, with the amount of money that we're asking for, we can basically say there's going to be a return of investment in this. In that, you know, the money here will help an individual build a business so that this business can help to build into the economy, can help to not just to raise revenues for itself, you know, to employ people, to pay taxes, and contribute into the economy. And again, and as far as the return of investment, you're looking at, you know, this investment of $250,000, you know, turning over 5-10 times over. Because if a business owner, if an individual who takes advantage of this program becomes successful, you're talking about years and years and years of a business activity that's going to continue to contribute to the coffers, to the revenues of the island, and continue to contribute to employment on the island and building not just the island economy, but helping to build the island community. And that's what this is for. I will recognize in advance a letter submitted by the Director of Revenue and Taxation, basically saying that one of the funding sources that we have identified in this bill may not be a viable source. However, the bill does provide some options with regards to where the funding source is at. And I hope that through the discussions that we'll have in the committee of the whole, that we'll find that these options continue to exist. I'm very pleased and very, I guess, enthused and optimistic because of the discussions we had in the committee of whole as early as this morning of some of the discussions that we're asking here. Again, I repeat that this is for $250,000. It's for a program that will help to build our economy. It's a program that will help that has a return on investment. It's a program that will help aspiring individuals, our residents, people who want to get into business, giving them that hand, lending them that hand, so that they can become, they can become successful in this. With that, Madam Chair, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to open to this, and I look forward to the discussions that we have on the floor. Thank you.
So, Masi, Senator Blas, do you have any questions for the panel?
You want to start with me? Okay. Gentlemen, thank you. Good afternoon. I think that for the purposes of the listening audience that we have present, I guess Mr. Steve Guerrero, Director of Office of Finance and Budget, Mr. Lester Carlson, the Director of Bureau of Budget and Management Resource, and Mr. Edward Byrne, the Director of Department of Administration. Gentlemen, with regard to the funding source, and this is where it could come down to, the funding source for this $250,000. And, there may have been some discussion about, granted that there was a letter that was provided by Ms. Shimizu with regards to one of the funding sources that was identified. I'd like to direct you, most especially Mr. Byrne, I want to thank you because, it was through your presentation at a previous public hearing and on the floor that at one time you had mentioned that the administration has taken a look at bills that were already in the coffer with regard to being able to fund it. And you had cautioned this body, says, look, there are these bills already that exist, to include Bill 170, I might add, that was already in the coffers, that were already under consideration, and that you felt confident that there was enough money, or there will be enough money to be able to fund projects such as this. Do you remember that conversation?
Mr. Byrne, before you begin, can we take a moment to swear in the panel?
Ma'am, I thought they were sworn in this morning.
We're on a new bill, a new topic, so we will once again swear in the panel. Sergeant?
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, you all affirm that any and all information they provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Madam Chair, you're under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Sergeant at Arms. Mr. Byrne, please.
Thank you, Senator, for that very important question. I remember discussing this issue, and we were discussing a bill with a much larger amount of funds being appropriated. And I recall being asked, with respect to that bill, were there sufficient funds to pay for the intent of that particular bill? And I confirmed that there were. I then went on, as you quite rightly say, to note that there were a number of other bills pending, of which, as you say, again, this was one, that needed to be considered by this body to determine a priority for these bills to be, I guess, listed in an order of priority as to which of these the body wished to be funded, because the total of the bills exceeded the amount of the, and this particular bill, what the alternative source of income is unappropriated revenues for 2021, which we, when we reviewed the CRER for 2021, subject to the audit, and we all understand that the audit's not complete, but we identified the figure of 62 million of excess revenues, i.e. excess means revenues received over and above the appropriated revenues. So under that 62 million, there's a fiscal note for Bill 19736, which actually lists the total appropriations of all the bills that could possibly be considered, and that's 111 million. So my advice, maybe that's taking it a little too strongly, but my concern was that the legislature would consider bills from unappropriated revenues, which is, you know, certainly your right to do so, but did not necessarily consider some of the expenses which had yet to be posted against those revenues. So that was the burden of what I was trying to tell the legislature at that time, and I would repeat it again today. Having said that, of course, this isn't a huge amount, it's certainly the right of this body to continue to make an appropriation against those unappropriated revenues, especially in this small amount that really is when we, maybe I should take a step back, and when we compile the audited statements, the auditors arrive at a figure that they consider material, and it's only if a proposed adjustment exceeds that figure of materiality that they consider making that adjustment. And this is well within that range. So I would conclude by saying that this body, if it so wishes, could make this appropriation from unappropriated revenues, and the Department of Administration will do their best to accommodate that, and should this bill pass in this session, it will make an adjustment to the financial statements for 2021 in order to recognize it.
And I think this body appreciates and recognizes full well that, the determination of what that revenue will be, or is, or may be, is actually determined after the audit. And in previous discussions, that audit was probably won't be done, or won't be finalized until May or June, right? So I think, well, am I right in that? That's what we're talking about?
That's possible. We're working as hard as we can to get it out as fast as we can. Yeah. But it may well be.
So this bill recognizes that, it's not saying that you're just going to appropriate it right away. We recognize the process that is necessary to come to that figure of what that unappropriated funds is, and we're willing to work with that. And I appreciate that when in an earlier statement, that, like I said, an earlier statement that you made, that in taking a look at all the bills that were in the queue, this included, one of the things you said is, I just hope that from hence on, you've already started to work on making sure that there was enough to fund these things should they pass, that was your desire and your hope that the legislature didn't look at appropriating more money from this, but these things were already, you're more than confident that it could be funded. Is that correct?
Senator, obviously not the whole 111 million.
No, I understand. But I'm talking about this specific bill.
This specific bill, I mean, if the legislature passes it, and I have to include this in the 2021 financial statements, I believe the financial statements will not be thrown into a deficit because of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. And lastly, do you feel, I mean, in your personal opinions, and do you feel that an effort such as this to be able to provide funding for business incubation would help to realize, you know, if these businesses are successful, will help to realize additional revenues that can be collected in the government because of now increased business activity? This is your personal opinion.
Yes, Senator. I was going to try and make it as personal as possible.
Okay.
All businesses need seed money. Seed money comes from all sorts of different sources, including government. If you're, you know, this bill provides seed money for this particular enterprise, which probably would be very hard to get commercially. So, you know, I have no difficulty in agreeing that and you know, not all businesses succeed, but this is most likely to succeed with the intent that you just stated.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Pito Terlahi, do you have any questions? Thank you. Senator San Augustine, thank you very much. Senator Brown, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do want to get a clarification because, you know, we've been talking about this EITC funding for quite some time. You know, and I still don't have a clear understanding if this is real money, tangible money, and money that we have access to like now. So can we get some actual feedback and clarification with regards to that? Where are we with regards to this EITC money that, you know, some of my colleagues have already introduced legislation up to $121 million. You know, we're on a spending spree, and I value the purpose of this legislation, the intention of this legislation, but I don't want to be passing bills where we're like, you know, here's 2 or 3 options to fund it. I mean, we should be very clear with regards to our responsibility here in the legislature to have very clear sources of funding, and that when we pass something, it's something that's legitimate. It's something that the parties that we are intending to be recipients of these funds will have them readily available, rather than, you know, we're grabbing money out of the sky. I don't think that's a very good practice, and certainly not fiscally responsible. So can we get clarity? I know we've asked this question in the last few months on previous visits here to the legislature, but where are we with regards to the actual EITC funding? Is the money in the bank? Is it here? Is it accessible for the legislature to appropriate now?
Thank you for the question, Senator Brown. Daphne Shimizu wrote the letter in anticipation of being here today. She is the point person with IRS and Treasury, and she mentioned to us during a meeting that we had Thursday that she finally got some clarity that we will be receiving the EITC as an advance. So Mr. Byrne has opened up a bank account in anticipation of receiving the money. And while I don't have, and I don't know if Daphne can disclose the terms just yet, because I don't believe that that's ready, but we are of the opinion that because it's coming in as an advance, and we've been saying this in the fiscal notes that we've been providing, that it is therefore not something that can be appropriated. It is, you know, extremely beneficial to the government of Guam that we don't have to pay EITC from our own revenue sources. But we wanted to make sure that this, when it was finally appropriate and confirmed, that you were made aware of the fact that it's now been determined to come in as an advance. We expect the money maybe sometime this week. We've been put on notice that the funding is, you know, imminent, and will be able to be used for
And do we
purposes.
know if there's going to be any restrictions on how those funds can be used? Does it go into the pot, as, you know, Mr. Burns tells us, it goes into the general fund? I mean, is it readily available for anything the legislature wants to appropriate it for?
No, not at all. So that's the whole reason for providing the letter.
Okay.
It is not subject to appropriation because it is provided to us as an advance specifically to pay EITC.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure that as the process moves along, then eventually you'll be, once you know what the terms are, I'm sure you'll relay that to us and the public. Again, I have no objections to definitely the purpose of this legislation. I think it certainly provides support and guidance in the community and in areas, particularly for interested up-and-coming entrepreneurs. But again, guys, we are in the Guam Legislature. Our main job is to do the budget and set policy. And I want to make sure that when we do appropriations, they're legitimate appropriations. We're not simply appropriating because we're trying to trip over each other and, you know, get our press releases out. We love our press releases. And yet we're not appropriating real money. That's not fiscally responsible, because if it's real money, then we probably have to really assess what the priorities are, because as I mentioned time and time again, we are living in an artificial economy. And when that federal dollar starts winding down and out, and there are members of this legislature that have not really gone through a real cash crisis in this government, when you are sitting and cutting and you're cutting into the flesh of your own people. Because once you start experiencing, that's a very painful process, very easy to appropriate. But when you got to take away, when you got to start cutting critical services and things that our people really need, when you have to split the baby in half, that's not an easy thing to do. And I hate to be here after we've been tripping over ourselves trying to appropriate everything under the sun during a time when our economy cannot stand on its own 2 feet. Take away all that federal money from Uncle Sam. Thank you, Uncle Sam. But if we remove that off the table, we're in big trouble. Unless we're going to tell all our private sector down in Tumon they don't matter, because we seem to be telling our private sector in Tumon they don't matter. We don't need them, because we can appropriate money left, right, up, and down. And we can do raises and press conferences and want to take credit for stuff while we're helping driving this government into more financial despair. So again, to my colleague that sponsored this bill, I love the idea and the concept, but until I see a clear funding source, I certainly cannot in good conscience vote for these bills. I think we need to be financially, if we're not financially responsible here at this level, being elected by the people of our community to make these financial decisions, we really have no business being here. You could put anybody here to do this. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. And that's really not what we're supposed to do. We should be far more fiscally responsible and make sure that when we do these appropriations, they're legitimate appropriations, that the money's going to be there for what we believe are the priorities and what we believe are the most critical needs of our people. So with that, I appreciate, thank you very much from our director, BBMR, in responding to my question. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Situas Masi, Senator Brown, Vice Speaker Tina Munoz Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't particularly have any questions at this time, and hopefully I'll save my comments when we go on the round to talk about the main motion. So thank you.
Got it. Thank you very much. Speaker Terlahi.
Sorry, I'm waiting for a printout of the fiscal note that he referred to. If I could either get a recess or come back to me. I just want to use that one if that's what's more relevant than the one we have in front of us.
Thank you very much. Senator Torres, do you have any questions?
Yes, I'm trying to follow the discussion about the funding source. And this bill is specific to the revenues received from the Earned Income Tax Credit reimbursement for calendar year 2021. There's been some discussion about the net effect of funds and the use of excess funds above the appropriations in the budget that can apply, that we won't bankrupt the government if we were to pass this bill. But I'm trying to reconcile the appropriation language in this bill and whether that is good to stand as is or whether there needs to be a funding source that is, There seems to be a conflict between what was presented in your letter that we received today and what is here, and the idea that, is there going to be enough money to cover this? But it's a source of funding that I just am finding very hard to wrap my head around. Can you just clarify that, please?
Sure. Senator Torres, you make a very good point. I think that the purpose of the letter today was to provide maybe the body with the ability to remove the reimbursement language and look at the 21 general fund unappropriated revenues. As Mr. Byrne has stated, we're in the process of doing the audit. We have to be able to, and I mentioned this earlier this morning when we were talking about taking the over expenditures from, my example was the fire department, making sure that their obligations are settled and that special fund expenditures are also settled, so that we could then take the revenues received in totality for the government of Guam and provide that information to the auditors for them to then take a look at how we ended up the fiscal year. We would then, first and foremost, have to eliminate, it's a nominal amount, $1.5 million in the existing deficit, before we can take any monies that we received over and above 2021 appropriated revenues. After we settle our obligations, we believe that we will have funds in excess. And I think what Mr. Byrne was saying, and I echo that, $250,000 doesn't seem to be unreasonable for that to materialize as a result of the audit. And he said if this measure passes, he would make sure the auditors are aware of the encumbrance of $250,000 on the fiscal 21 performance. So hopefully there's some clarity that, there were a number of bills, as Mr. Byrne mentioned, and the fiscal note for Bill 170, which was provided in August of last year, articulated a number of bills from the EITC reimbursement. So we're basically telling you guys today, you can't do that.
The EITC amount is more or less a moving target. Isn't that correct? You can approximate what the EITC payments will be, but until people actually file their taxes, that definitive number is unclear, right? You can only approximate what the earned income tax credit claims will be and payouts. Is that correct?
That's true.
And so in this situation where this is an advance towards that, there could be a reconciliation at the end, correct? Where if GovGuam exceeds their projected EITC payments for the tax year, that they can go back to the federal government and seek reimbursement of that thing. So you have to also allow yourselves the cushion of being able to afford and have sufficient revenues in your general fund to pay the EITC if it should exceed what the federal government advance would be. Isn't that correct?
I believe in theory that the amount that we expect to get is based upon prior EITC payments. And remember, we're going to get EITC in perpetuity, so we're not going to have to do this stuff anymore.
Right.
And I think Mr. Byrne has asked for a segregation of fund sources for a taxpayer who might be the recipient of the child tax credit, the EITC, and like another, the recovery rebate credit. So all those little blocks of money that actually have federal funds attached to it need to be segregated when it comes down to DOA for ultimate payment. They're not going to be lumped into the general fund,
Right.
and we're not going to reimburse ourselves from that. It's going to be coming out of the special funds that are set up specifically for these things. So I think, Senator Torres, that since this is the first year that we're getting this as an advance, and thankfully we're going to be getting it in perpetuity, It relieves general fund pressure. It provides a mechanism for replenishment of the funds by the federal government. So it's a good thing. And we're not going to be advancing general fund money to pay the EITC. That would be fiscally irresponsible because we're going to get, we believe, in excess of $50 million. So, you know, we're going to have the funds to be able to pay the EITC from federal funds, and we'll work on the mechanism for replenishment of those funds from the federal government so that it is not a general fund or a Guam tax-based obligation, and it frees up, you know, funds for us moving forward.
And what a relief that is that unfunded
Yes.
mandate is now there.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Duenas.
Just modestly, Madam Chair, I think it's clear now that in anticipation of this bill going forward, the author may move the amendment, or it's just going to be prudent to probably amend out the EITC. And so we're now debating, I think DOA, BBMR are comfortable somewhat going forward with the anticipation of 2021 tax year, or 2021 excess in budget, you know, going to be, you know, on the eve of or subsequent to the audit. I think the $60 million question that we're grappling over when we first started talking about EITC to include the issues of debt service for the hospital as well as the prison. We were trying to find out what that start date is. So I guess I want to put this on the record now. This is tax year 2021 reimbursement for tax year. Oh, that's why I want it on the record. Can we get that on the record, Lester?
Yeah, it's not a reimbursement because we are now in the process of paying calendar year 21 tax refunds, and we have the funds coming in to be able to make the obligation for EITC obligations in 21 from a federal source.
Okay. So that's just clear. And so tax year 2020 is off the table. It didn't happen because ARP was contemplated or deliberated and came out in 2020. But it looks like this program starts 2021.
CARES Act was 2020.
Okay.
ARP was 2021.
Okay. So now we're clear. There's going to be no lag of a $60 million pot that was available because reimbursement, because we've already paid it. This is the start time, and it's going to be used, and it's not available for appropriation.
I think that's accurate, sir.
Okay. It's just important because we really have to take this into consideration beyond this bill. This bill with what it on its face reasonably asks for, and I talked to a number of individuals who are actively doing this incubator businesses throughout the community, and it's really a valuable program. Just for our listening audience, and I'm sure the author will elaborate maybe in closing, but a lot of these incubators, a lot of these businesses are small businesses in the village, and as we prepare to start up tourism again, there are a lot of homegrown businesses, using the reuse some of the G3 stuff and other things, making products that they could sell, maybe to tourists as they travel throughout the village. It's individuals who, want to try to emulate Tita's Guzzeria or Rischetti or other things to where local, maybe coconut candy or, of course, other delicacies that would be packaged and otherwise be able to be for sale. And a lot of people have those talents, but they don't have the business acumen to carry it forward and make it a true small cottage-type businesses. We've been discussing a lot of that in the last several years. So I know it's a valuable program. So as we debate that going forward, at least knowing that there's the possibility of the funding source outside of the EITC. But other than that, I can say on the subsequent bills coming up, I think it's going to be a significant different conversation. So on the first round, Situs Masi, just for the ability to have that small conversation, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you very much, Senator Dueñas. Speaker Terlahi, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to reconcile the fiscal note on Bill 170. So if you take out all the discussion regarding EITC, which I think is moot now, we're not going to be able to use that as a funding source. And we talk about just the use of the FY 2021 general fund unappropriated revenues. I just want to clarify. So according to this fiscal note, estimated general fund balance for FY21 was approximately 20 million. And so they note that from that 20 million, we would have to account for continuing appropriations, existing invoices, deficits on special fund revenues. Those are only three things that they list in this fiscal note. So I just wanted to know if we could get the amounts of these so we can get a better understanding of what type of balance is still available.
I believe we're working on that, Madam Speaker, and it was a point that we wanted to make known that, again, I hate to say it for the third time today, but the fire department.
Pardon? About what?
I said I hate to say it for the third time today, but
Yeah.
the fire department overspent. So we need to transfer money to basically meet the obligations that they incurred in 21, as an example. We also need to be able to take care of special funds whose mechanism didn't, and then any invoices, and I think we have vendor obligations, we have tax refunds. That's what that refers to. So I think we've been consistent in saying that out of the 62 million that we believe we might have gotten over the adopted level, we still need to reconcile everything, and then again eliminate the $1.5 million deficit. But we believe that there's enough room after we take care of all these obligations to address a couple of these things. And as Mr. Burns said, the amount is not extremely significant, and the cause merits it for consideration. So we think we're going to be able to get there.
Thank you, but I'm sure you can appreciate that, we need numbers. That's what we need your help with, is to provide us with the actual numbers so that we can say with confidence there is enough, as opposed to, just a general statement that, we think we can accommodate it. So if we could just be specific. So you said the deficit 1.5, you said GFD, what is that amount?
It was just to be able to let you know that you've seen over the years that the governor's general fund transfer, that is part and parcel to ending a fiscal year. We haven't done that exercise yet. Mr. Byrne has just a little while ago closed accounts. So now my staff has to be able to take a look at how we ended up in the general fund and whether or not we have agencies traditionally who lapse, and we pull lapse funding to put over to those who basically overspent. So once we do that exercise, we'll provide that information to Mr. Byrne, and he provides that information to the auditors. Then we have, again, the tax liabilities, the vendor payments that are outstanding. And so it's a work in progress, Madam Speaker. We don't have the exact numbers for you yet, but please bear with us while we go through the exercise.
Well, I'd like to at least use the numbers that you are using to say with confidence that this bill will not exceed the 20 million that's available. And I want to ask you also, and so I still want those numbers, Mr. Byrne, if you have them. Also, Bill 230 on the fiscal note, you went through a detailed examination of the 62 million excess FY21 general fund revenues, and then in detail, the 1.5 details the numbers that would be used. And I appreciate that, and I'd actually like to use that and just add on and update that, right, from the fiscal note from Bill 230, which talked about all the current obligations for the FY21, right, that we have to account for. And that started with 62 million. But the fiscal note on 170 starts with general fund balance for FY21 of 20 million. So in addition to the details of, what we need to subtract from these amounts to see what's still available, if you could tell us, why we're using 20 million in one fiscal note and the 62 million in the other fiscal note, and which one do you think we should rely on for this bill?
So the fiscal note for Bill 170 was provided to it was done in August of 2021. I don't have...
170 fiscal
Yes,
note?
yeah.
Okay.
August 20.
On the amended bill?
No, for Bill 170.
Yes, December 2021.
No, ma'am, it's August.
Well, there's an amended fiscal note, or a fiscal note it says as amended.
Okay, well, I have the one that I brought with me today. And so the first fiscal note was done August 16th, 2021. If there was an amended one, I apologize, I didn't bring it. But I'm sure that Bill 230 was probably authored well later in calendar year 2021. So there, as the passage of time occurs, we have more information on how we ended up with 21. So I think that whatever you're looking at for Bill 230 is probably the more accurate depiction, given the passage of time. And
Okay, so instead of using, could we take a recess? I'd like to provide him with the document because I don't want to put words in his mouth.
We'll take a minute's recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you. So if I could just get the answers to that, my first question on the amounts that, for the fiscal note.
So are you asking us to take a look at the fiscal note for 218?
For 170, as amended, this bill we're talking about, excuse me, the fiscal note, I read it to you already. I don't want to use my time again. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the bottom. Continuing appropriation and existing invoice, what amount are you guys using to give us confidence that we can cover all of these?
Okay, so for 170, Mr. Byrne and I conferred from the $62 million, $20 million for tax refund obligations / vendor payables, $20 million, that gets us to 42, $20 million to take care of the special fund shortfalls, that gets us to 22.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you just start again if you're doing a new list, please? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we ended up with $62 million in general fund revenue over the adopted level in 21. Jesus Christ. How many times do I have to start and stop?
What's wrong?
Can you hear me now? Thank you. $62 million in general fund revenue over the adopted level in fiscal 21. We have stated that there are tax refund liabilities and vendor payables and approximately $20 million. And I'm giving approximate numbers because, again, Speaker, we are in the process of doing the audit, but you wanted to have an idea of whether or not, there's going to be some money left in 21. So we're at 42 million. The special fund shortfall is $20 million. That brings us down to $22 million. $1.5 million to retire the deficit. That brings us to $20,500,000, thereabouts. We've committed publicly to do war claims at $10 million. So we're about at $10 million with where we are right now. The fiscal note that was handed out for Bill 218 also talks about the LEAP program, but I believe we're paying the LEAP program out of current year fiscal revenues and not 21 revenues. So there should be a distinction in that, but the fiscal note for Bill 218 did note that there has been agreement by the governor to make the other $25 million in the LEAP funds from local monies available. But correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Byrne, but I believe that's coming out of 22 revenues, not 21.
That's correct.
So there, Madam Speaker, is kind of in a nutshell where we believe that we are, subject to reconciliation that we're going through, utilizing the governor's transfer authority, and then providing the obligations and the revenues to the auditors for them to then make a determination on how we actually ended up fiscal year 21.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And so you also estimated the amount that EITC might come in to be over 50 million.
That's
and
yes.
There's an account set up. So are we expecting that like any day, or would it be longer than a month from now?
Maybe this week.
Okay. All right. And then what about continuing appropriations? Do we need to account for those, as the fiscal note on the Bill 170 said? Continuing appropriations?
As a rule, I understand the generosity of the body in providing those accommodations to agencies in the 22 budget. But the continuing appropriation, we haven't determined what those actually are because you actually have to take a look at whether or not somebody utilized the entirety of the appropriation given to them. So as a rule, unless it's a special revolving fund that we are comfortable with, we're trying real hard not to compound the 22 revenues with the adding of 21 continuing appropriations. So one reason is that we really don't know whether or not Agency X actually had a surplus that may have had to be used to mitigate an over expenditure by Agency Y when we do the governor's transfer authority. So we're trying not to utilize that generous accommodation.
Right, so do we not need to account for it anymore and as it was accounted for in the fiscal note?
It's one of these things where we're just, letting you know that the provision for the budget is there. We're trying not to invoke it so that it might unnecessarily compound where the audit ends up being, because you can't use 21 continuing appropriations from the general fund, because certainly the special funds fell short. So if there was money in the general fund, then we need, first and foremost, we have to determine how to end the fiscal year 21 with the governor's transfer to mitigate any over expenditures. Then we can determine whether or not, after that was all said and done, we exhausted all of what was available to transfer from the general fund. So it's, like I said, Madam Speaker, it's a work in progress, and we're trying not to unnecessarily compound it.
Is it possible then that GFD requirements exceed 10 million?
Not 10, but I would venture to say, just off the top of my head, that it exceeds 5.
All right, so we have 10, we remove the 5 for GFD, we have still 5 left to feel comfortable.
In these draft terms, yes.
Yes, all right, thank you. And not accounting for any continuing appropriation, just saying that's not necessary.
Yeah, we're trying not to, yeah.
Mr. Byrne?
Just to clarify, Madam Speaker, continuing appropriations aren't accounted for in the audit. In fact, they're specifically excluded. It's just a cash problem because it's already appropriated, but DOA has to find the cash.
All right, I'm bringing it up because it says on the fiscal note saying we should account for it. All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
So just Masi Speaker, Senator Titlegy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, Lester or Mr. Byrne, can you please read the letter into the record for the listening audience, those who are listening, from Reverend Tax? You could just start with this Hafati, Senator Sinagosny.
Okay, Senator Titlegy. This is a letter from the Department of Revenue and Taxation dated February 22nd, 2022. It's addressed to the Honorable Joe S. Sinagosny, and it cites his physical address at the Rand Care Building in Tumuning. And it says it's been transmitted via email, and it references appropriation of 2021 Earned Income Tax Credit by Bills 170-36, 172-36, and 227-36. Affidavit, Senator Sinagosny. Just this past week, the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation received approval for the 2021 Earned Income Tax Credit Implementation Plan for Guam as authorized by the American Rescue Plan, which was signed by President Biden on March 11, 2021. With respect to funding of the 2021 Earned Income Tax Credit by the federal government, it is now clear that the funds will be funded as an advance to the government of Guam for the specific purpose of paying EITC for tax years 2021, as opposed to a reimbursement of amounts paid by the general fund. Because of this, the amounts received for the 2021 earned income tax credit are not able to be appropriated. Please feel free to contact us at your convenience with any questions or concerns regarding this. It's signed by Daphne Shimizu, Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and it's countersigned by me as the Director of BBMR, primarily for the last part of the letter that provides the body clarity with regard to the ability to appropriate from the EITC advance.
Thank you, Lester, for that. So Lester, what happens to the bill that we recently passed in November regarding the appropriations for the earned income tax credit for the hospital and DOC?
You mean in the budget?
In the budget, it actually set aside the money, but it was in November, the bill that passed, that actually appropriated the earned income tax credit.
Okay. Senator, we didn't know at the time that the bill was passed if we were going to get it as a reimbursement or in advance. So we've been trying to be very open with regard to the possibility of it coming in as an advance, and that anything that's appropriated wouldn't be able to be honored because you can't use the federal money other than for what it's pegged for. So it looks like it's not going to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Lester. Lester, I was looking over the numbers too. I put together the earned income tax credit. So that's now mute, basically. We no longer needed. The child tax credit was about 35 million, and that was obligated to taxes. We were talking earlier about the FY21 excess revenue. You spoke about the 62 million. And you mentioned war claims, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Burns too, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but war claims at 10 million is to be used from excess revenue of 21. Special fund shortfall for the FY21 was clocking in at about $20 million. Then, of course, the tax refunds that was implemented in the budget bill for FY22 using excess revenue of $20 million, well, the excess from FY21 of $20 million that will go into the tax refund account. Then you mentioned something about a shortfall, Lester. Is there additional shortfall in FY21 that you mentioned, or is that the 20 million that we're talking about special fund shortfall?
The conversation that I just had with the speaker, right, reiterated how we went from 62 million, right, taking 20 million for tax refunds and vendor liabilities, down to 42. $20 million shortfall in special funds, so we're down to 22. $1.5 million to retire the deficit, so we're at 20,500,000.
Wait, sorry, Lester. Man. Can you start that from the beginning again, please? It's kind of hard with the muffled and mask and stuff, so. Get my speakers up here. Okay, again, please. Por favor.
$62 million is the estimated revenue in excess of the adopted level in FY 2021. We take $20 million for tax refunds and other vendor liabilities, and these are, again, as I reiterated to the speaker, approximate numbers. We're at 42 million. $20 million to take care of the special fund shortfalls. That brings us to 22 million. 1.5 million to retire the deficit. So we're at 20,500,000. 10 million to take care of the war claims. So we're at 10.4. The speaker asked about my estimate for the fire department shortfall, and I told her that it's probably not as much as 10 million, but I believe it's certainly over 5. So the discussion that preceded this discussion came away with her looking like she was the speaker, looking like she was comfortable with what it was that we were saying, that we would probably be able to shoulder a $250,000 appropriation from FY21 revenues, subject to the conclusion and verification by the auditors.
Okay, so we're looking at about 5 million left, right?
In general terms, yes.
Okay. What funding are you using to pay for the public safety pay raises? Are you using, well, it's obvious you're probably not using FY21 because you're down to 5 million. Are you using current revenue?
We're using current revenues. If we incur any shortfall in revenues, then we will augment that with ARP.
With ARP, okay. And that's about 16 million, right?
Pardon me?
Is that about 16 million?
Is that your number? That's the base. Yeah, that's, according to Mr. Byrne, that's the base.
Okay. And the LEAD program, you just told us that you're using current revenue of 25 million, right? This was not a, I don't think this was part of the budget bill. So how are, what agencies are not getting any money because you're using the 25 million?
Nobody said nobody was getting any money. As funds are available, I think there was a measure passed by the body that appropriated $5 billion. So we're trying to incorporate that in the weekly cash disbursements to autonomous agencies and set aside for tax refunds. So there's not $25 million that's going to magically appear, but over the course of the fiscal year, we're going to try to assist local businesses in being able to provide the local part of the LEAP program. So it's a work in progress. As cash is available, Mr. Byrne will take care of ensuring that all the obligations of the government of Guam and anything that can be applied to the LEAP program will be factored into his cash disbursement plan.
Based on your report on the ARP funding balance, I'm showing a report of $4 million left from the ARP funding.
In what category?
Well, okay, then you tell me, what is your balance so far that has not been encumbered?
You're asking me a question based upon
I'm
information
asking
you
you
have.
a question, how much funding is left over from the ARP funding that has not been encumbered or directed to?
Senator, the report that you've been receiving
Right?
allocates all of it.
Okay, so all the money has been encumbered then, right? So what is this?
All of the money is earmarked for a use by the governor.
Okay, used by the, but yet you're saying that whatever you can't use in the local and current revenues, you're going to go through using ARP funding. So I'm just trying to figure, is there a balance in the ARP funding that's not being spent so you can cover these areas that you may be short?
Do you have the report in front of you?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, if you get the report, you can look at the public safety agencies and you can see what has been drawn and what has not been drawn. So I would encourage you to do that.
The TAP grant, there's still about $1.8 million left for the TAP grant.
What TAP grant are you talking about?
You're not familiar with that? It was in the OPA's report. $12 million that was given to the government of Guam, a technical assistance program, and $1.8 million has yet to be expended?
I don't report TAP grant, ma'am.
Okay, so you're not familiar with that?
That's
Okay.
if you're talking about the education stabilization TAP grant that the governor received.
Right.
I don't control that fund.
Okay, I was just wondering if you know the balance on that. So what happens to the report that was issued on September 30, 2021 with regards to the reserves? At the end of that, they were showing $11 million, 86,013 that was in reserves. What is that money intended to do?
As of September 30th?
Yes, that's the last
Yeah.
report I received.
So there are a number of steps that are needed to be taken to end the fiscal year. Reserves that are available for obligations. As you might recall, Senator, bills come in after September 30th, sometimes 60, 90 days afterwards. So the reserves are hedged to try to mitigate any over expenditures. So we're still in the process of being able to determine what it is that needed to be released to meet FY21 obligations. The reserves are a very prudent fiscal tool. It's the only tool I have to control spending.
Is the 11 million still there as a balance of reserves set aside?
I don't know. We're in the process of finalizing the FY21, so I couldn't tell you.
The ARP funding must be expended or encumbered by what year? Do you know?
ARP spending?
Yes,
December of 2024.
December 24. Has I know Tax is not here, and I think you said something earlier with regards to not using general fund to pay out EITC. But, you know, people have been filing since January 1st for their FY21 taxes. Has any of the EITC been paid out?
We haven't paid anything yet.
Okay. So you're waiting for this money to pay out the year?
No, we have not released any tax refunds yet.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yes, Senator.
Are we discussing Bill 170 or we're talking about everything in general?
Everything in general, sir.
Well,
No, then
Madam
it's out of
Chair,
order.
point of information,
There's
the
been a
bill
point of
actually
order.
talks about different funding sources. That's what I'm bringing into play here. If you look at the bill on page 30, and that was my last question, Lester, if the bill on page 3 talks about using earned income tax credit, and then it goes to American Rescue Plan Act, and then it goes to general fund, 21 unappropriated revenues. That's what I'm getting to. We're looking at all these fundings that are available and what you're doing to spend, and I'm just going through a list.
Thank you, Senator. Please finish up your question.
Well, I was just answering his question.
Yeah, Senator Taitigui, when Senator Duenas was speaking, he was very articulate in the fact that the author might want to strike the EITC language because it's very clear that it's no longer a viable fund source. So
Absolutely, Lester, but it also shows other funding sources to be used in this legislation too, which is called and/or the 2021 General Fund Unappropriated Revenues. And right now, we just went through that exercise to show, I mean, in fact, twice. The speaker brought it up, and now I'm bringing it up. It's showing 5 million, but yet you still have expenditures in 2021 that you're talking about. And it's not even gone through the public auditor as well. So we're not even sure if that 5 million is true to form. We're just taking your word for it right now.
actually, the question was whether or not 250,000 was available.
That what?
The question was whether or not 250,000 is available for the bill. What the speaker was trying to get comfortable with is that very fact, ma'am. So please don't lose sight of that.
Well, I'm not, because after 170-36, there's 172-36 and 227-36 that's going to be addressed in this legislature. So maybe if we can clear this up right now before going to the other bills and get these answers, answered, or these questions answered, then maybe we won't have to move forward with the other bills, Lester.
Thank you, Senator. You're out of time. We have completed the first round of questions. We will recess for a moment. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess, and we will be in recess until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much, colleagues. We will be in recess until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you to our panel. Good night, everyone.